Hi, welcome to this week's episode of Amber Online. That's what I name my show. I hope it's not weird. Anyways, I'm here to warn you before it starts that here there be dragons. And by dragons, I mean spoilers. I mean there are spoilers in this episode for Gravity. Be forewarned. Hi guys, welcome to the show. This week I'm going to be talking about Gravity. Just wanted to see it last night because it was Tuesday and it was cheaper here in Canada. We have Tuesday cheap night. I really enjoyed it. First off, I want to say that it was a fascinating film, and I'm going to do a little analysis for you. I'm going to critique it and examine some of the motives I think it had, or at least the motives that I read from it. So just to sort of frame this, I want to say that we as human beings, or me personally, I fear crowds. I fear being trapped in like a subway with a bunch of people and them going nuts. This is where anxiety for zombies and for viral spread comes from, because we're afraid of other people getting up in our business and attacking us, and we can't get away from them. But we're equally afraid of being completely isolated. And, we know this is true. We know that we don't want to be with people all the time, but especially, I want them to be there if I want them. I want the option of going out and seeing people or not seeing people. And that's why we have all these pieces of media that come around this tension, this fear of isolation. We have things like Sphere in 1995, Samuel L. Jackson, that you may have seen. It's this underwater, completely trapped, completely isolated area. You can't get to other people. It's this anxiety surrounding the idea that the environment can kill you. It's not just that other people might get you or a monster might get you, but you will eventually run out of air, it's a guarantee, and you may in the meantime face some other sort of danger from within, from a pressure leak or from an air leak or from, a strange killer jellyfish when you're out walking around on the bottom of the ocean, or from an incredible hallucination generated by someone who's entered an alien artifact. Any of these things could happen. But what's fascinating with films in this vein, and I'm going to compare Gravity to this actually, I know it's not exactly in the same vein, but I think it has similar themes, that you have isolation, and you have immediately after that an examination of human nature and faith, and where we came from. And I guess it's a portrayal of why we're social creatures. So in films like Sphere, you have these people who are trapped, and they can't get away, and they're isolated from the rest of the world, and then they gain these godlike powers. And they begin to betray one another, and they begin to question about whether or not they should have them, or what it means, or where this artifact came from, or what it was supposed to teach them, or who presented it to humanity. Further to that, you have films such as 2001: Space Odyssey, which you should probably just go and see, because I could analyze that for 20 minutes on its own. But it's, the inception of humanity through violence, and the programming of an artificial intelligence that's overcoming us, but we need to overcome it, and are we better than the computer because we're spiritual beings? It's an examination of our own mortality as he watches himself age at the obelisk and be a young man and who he really is. We have the star child coming in that orbits Earth as this whole rebirth metaphor of something new. It's a very fascinating take, and it's something that science fiction tackles a lot. Even the Dead Space games, while they are different in that they're a horror and they're trying to appeal to that basal nature, you're still trapped in space. You're still in this place where you cannot get away. And even there was an outcry when people heard there would be a second player option in Dead Space 3, because it's not going to be as scary if someone else is there. Because immediately after we introduce another person, it's not as scary. So you have this solitary adventurer, or at most, in Dead Space 3, a very small group, a pair, and they are fighting against this spiritual institution. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? We don't know. We know as players it's bad, but in this world it's framed as though it may be a positive thing, that some people believe the necromorphs are the next evolution, that the marker is a spiritual thing. It allows you to see deceased loved ones. It drives you insane. It gets inside your head. What does it all mean? If you're looking at films like Prometheus, You have the scientist who's a faithful individual who's then met her maker and just goes on to question who made them. This theme of where did humanity come from when we look to the stars is very recurrent, and in many ways Gravity reflects a lot of these themes, and in many ways it's a very, very different film altogether. So what I want to talk about then is really, really spoilerific, so if you haven't seen Gravity, I wouldn't necessarily recommend watching the rest of this video because I am going to spoil it, and I think it's really best that you see it unspoiled. So I'm going to wait while you go and see it. Okay, that was long enough because, you can pause the video and go and see it, and I'm not actually going to wait an hour and a half or like 2 hours and go and you stand in line for popcorn and you come back and you watch a movie. Anyways, we have this story of 2 astronauts, Ryan and Matt, and a third guy who dies like right away, so I don't remember his name. But they're out here in the void of space, beautiful, beautiful cinematography that's so well put together, long shots, perspective from the astronauts that was very uniquely done. It was fascinating to watch. And that was a great thing about it, that while it was happening, it was fascinating to watch. I wasn't thinking about any of these things I'm going to talk to you about while I was watching it. I was just watching the movie going like, oh my gosh, terrible things are happening, and freaking out a little bit, and then calming down, and then freaking out because it's like a roller coaster. It's a thriller. It's supposed to be a roller coaster. And it was really, really well done in that way, that it can allow you to think about it later, but you're not thinking about it too much while you're watching it. You're still just enjoying the movie, and then you can have this reflection later. So, we're out there with Sandra Bullock and George Clooney, who did fantastic jobs of portraying this human emotion. You're out in this void, and they're alone, and again, there's no supernatural intervention in this film. It's just straight up speculative fiction on what could happen with the resources we have now, essentially. So they're up in space, a debris field is generated from Russians accidentally shooting one of their own satellites. Oh, Russians, you're so crazy. And they're hit by debris. Their third astronaut is killed. The crew that brought them up is killed, and there's just the 2 of them left. And she spins off into space. She's flipping out, and we see this rotating image of the stars and Earth, and the stars and Earth, and Mother Earth, and the vastness of space, and where did we come from? And then she calms down, and George Clooney comes out, and he catches her. And of course, she doesn't want to let him go, but he has to push her away so that he can properly maneuver his jets. And she's very anxious about this, about being separated from him when she's been separated from Earth and she's been caught. And they make their way towards the Russian space station because they're going to try to get back to Earth. Obviously, you can't stay in space. This whole time, she's giving you a countdown of when her O2 is about to run out, what % she has left. George Clooney, Matt, is indicating that the pressure on his jetpack is running out as well. They only have so much boost to get them back to the Russian space station. So, of course, by the time they get there, he has nothing left, and he has to let go so that she can survive. So, after he lets go, and of course, she begs him not to, she's done a great emotional moment of breaking as she has to let him go, and she gets inside the space shuttle, and you have this very overt metaphor of the womb, of her being reborn into this new life. She's completely alone. Now that she's lost her last human connection in her fellow astronaut Matt, now she's completely alone. She floats out of her suit into the fetal position and is reborn and has to start on her own. Earlier on in the film, before he is tragically lost, Matt tells her, when they first lose contact with Houston, that she has to just keep talking in case they can hear her, even though she can't hear them. Now, later, when she's in her pod after being on the Russian space station and she's run out of fuel because everything that can go wrong did go wrong, she makes contact with someone, but it's just a man on Earth, and she doesn't speak the same language as him, and she doesn't know what's happening, and she's sort of essentially talking to herself, but with the comfort of another human voice at this stage. So she is indicating that she's concerned because there'll be no one to pray for her, and she can't pray for herself because she's never been taught to pray. Now, at this point, she's sort of given up, and she's beginning to release the air from her cabin, and she then has a vision and a hallucination as she's low on oxygen of Matt, who's come back and he's made it, and he tells her what she needs to do, how she needs to solve this problem. Of course, we know as the audience that was impossible, and it was her subconscious, and she's able to solve this problem because she learns what she needs to do, because she already knew it. But it's just a very fascinating indication that she's here and she's talking about prayer. Now, she's never been taught to pray, and she's imploring someone to pray for her, and then she has what is essentially an angelic intervention, as she appears to see it in my reading. That after she sees him, she begins speaking to him as though he's protecting her, and she speaks to him as though he's in heaven. She had a daughter that had died, and she talks to him about going to see her daughter and giving her a kiss, and how her daughter is her angel. So she seems to have formed this opinion then, if only for her own comfort, that he is in heaven, and that he will be able to see her daughter. So she's gained this view of faith now. You've heard the phrase, there's no atheist in a foxhole, that when you're facing this kind of crisis, it's often that people come to find faith, because really what else can you do? So she makes it to the Chinese space station. She's riding the shuttle home, and she has a baptism of fire as she enters the atmosphere, and her shuttle lands in the water, and it's a baptism of water. And if you're familiar with any sort of Judeo-Christian imagery, you'll be familiar with the baptism of fire and water. And when she finally makes it out of the shuttle and comes up on land, she's in this unspoiled garden. So she's been reborn in the stars and came to Earth through fire and water, and then ends up in an Eden type scenario, which is a very fascinating examination of her faith as she comes to have faith. She comes to learn to pray. She comes to learn what's important. But at the same time, we have a story that's very much about the overcoming nature of the individual human being. That she's able to do all of this stuff because she doesn't give up. She doesn't have actual supernatural intervention at any point. She just keeps on going and keeps herself alive against all odds. So this is interesting because you're looking at it as the potential of her faith keeping her alive, but at the same time having no overt intervention of any being that would have saved her. And this, to me, it can be then read either way. You can read it as a story of faith because she's gained something in her life that she lost, and that's why she was able to overcome. Because earlier she talks about how she has sort of an empty life because she's lost her daughter and she doesn't really know what's happening since that happened, and she's just sort of aimless, and she just goes to work and she comes home and she's very aimless in her life. Or you can examine it as the story of like human beings overcoming on their own, and we don't need anyone else because we're strong enough on our own. It's neat. That was my reading on it. I don't know what your reading on it is. There's a lot of other layers in this film that I haven't examined, and it's really great for that you can go in and you can sort of pick apart the imagery and the symbolism that they've chosen to include and see what it means. And even if you don't want to, you can enjoy a really great performance by two seasoned actors that you may or may not like because they're A-list. But you can really enjoy the performance, really enjoy the action elements, really enjoy the excitement of it, and then sit back and think about what it means. And it's fantastic for that. So I really encourage you to go see it. I'm sorry if you didn't go see it, and now I just spoiled it entirely for you. But it's a really remarkable film. It's something you should check out. And I hope you enjoyed my thoughts. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you see it the same way I do, if you see it differently, if you can see why I see it this way. Have fun analyzing it. I sure did. Bye.